This is Digital Pathology Today. Now, here's your host, Dr. Joseph Anderson.
Artificial intelligence in clinical practice is here. It is real. Welcome to Digital Pathology Today. I'm Joe Anderson. Our guest is Mariano de Socarraz, president of CorePlus, with over 25 years experience in anatomic pathology. CorePlus is an international specialty laboratory serving clients throughout the U.S. and the Caribbean. We're talking today about the digital journey that CorePlus underwent. What were the steps involved once the decision was made to go digital, what lessons were learned, and of course, what is the business case for going digital? The big news, of course, is CorePlus made the first installation of an AI system for clinical use in the Americas. What is this system going to do? What are the use cases and practical applications? And what are the gains and benefits we can expect?
This episode of Digital Pathology Today has been brought to you in part by JAV Advisors. With over 16 years' experience, JAV Advisors focuses on business and management consulting for digital pathology and artificial intelligence in deployment within histology, pathology, and cytology laboratories throughout the world. Call 213-258-6268 for more information. JAV Advisors.
Mariano de Socarraz, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you for inviting me, Joe. Really a pleasure to be here with you. This is really a very interesting opportunity to evangelize us on digital pathology. So thank you so much for the efforts that you all are doing.
Oh, absolutely. I think we're living in very exciting times now. I think we have kind of a lot of forces coalescing or coming together. I think first of all is the drive towards the adoption of digital pathology. The technology has been with us for a while, but we're at very relatively low levels of adoption in the U.S. anyway. And, secondly, we've had this COVID epidemic, which kind of gave us a shot in the arm or forced maybe some groups to adopt digital before they were actually planning on it. And then third, new advances in machine learning and artificial intelligence have allowed us to develop and implement those types of solutions as well. So let's talk about your journey. You've been in this business for a very long time. I've known you for at least 10 years or more, and I'm sure you went back even further than that. So tell us a little bit about your story and the practice you've developed, CorePlus.
Sure. Well, it's been a while since we had caught up, but just to give you a little background, I started really in the imaging side because I initially started as a radiologic technologist and then got involved in sonography. And it was through that imaging effort and those years that I spent in the imaging side that has prepared me for what we're doing today in digital pathology. Many of those years, it was the transformation at that time from film-based, the X-ray film, to digital. And I remember that we at one time represented a company that would scan the actual X-rays or the film and convert it to digital, which is kind of very a parallel to what we do today with the slide. So we saw that transformation in imaging, and for me this is kind of a very similar journey. How we get there, obviously file size and some other constraints that we have are different, but in the general sense there's some very good parallels that we can learn from. So we've adopting that technology, or at least that experience for me, helped me in this journey now that we're embarked in.
Okay. Yeah, I think there certainly are many, many parallels between these two imaging-based specialties, pathology and radiology. So you clearly were working in pathology, before things went digital. So I think we're here talking about a couple main themes today. So one, I guess, would be the journey of going digital, which is one thing. And then secondly, you have huge news about implementing one of the first AI-based solutions in North America and even the world. So I think we're going to be excited to hear about that. So first, maybe just take us back to the days of analog pathology or the glass slides and the microscope. So what did that look like in your practice? How did you build that up? And then at what point did you get the impetus to go digital, and what was that like?
Well, always this movement of glass has always been an issue, obviously, in our day-to-day lives, And at least when we started, or when I started in pathology 25 years ago, what I was looking for was how could we look at workflow. So number one was really streamlining the workflow that we were currently doing in an analog basis. So how could we be much more efficient in that process? And that's what initially drove us to develop our own IT platform that we call the Digital Pathology Workflow, and it was really to maximize the efficiency of the system or the whole workflow in pathology from the initial client side, where we took the pre-analytical process, let's say, where we worked with a urologist or what a clinic or surgery center by barcoding things and having requisitions that were identified for that particular client, and really worked on the workflow side so that we could get TPID all the way through. So that area we worked on very heavily, but obviously the constraints of glass and moving it has been a problem. We also instituted where the pathologist was able then to pretty much sign out the cases directly. We created that efficiency where we never have used a transcriptionist in our practice, and that also created a lot of efficiency. And so we've been doing stuff in the cloud for more than 10 years. We scan everything, and there is no paper that flows through our process. So we've been there for a very long time, and obviously that's because we were able to build our own systems.
So you're somewhat of a trailblazer, for lack of a better word. I think in any new technology, there's an adoption curve, and you clearly were on the early adopters end of the spectrum. So what was that like? I think now maybe there's more off-the-shelf solutions or more end-to-end solutions, but it sounds like you really identified the need proactively and really dug in and tried to develop your own solutions. So I guess what was there must have been a business case or some advantage that you were going to achieve by doing that. So let's talk about the business case. So what did you see at that point where going to digital made sense?
When you say digital, you're talking about digital pathology, or are we talking about just digital workflow?
Well, that's an interesting point too. I guess kind of behind the scenes, there's these workflows, where you're talking about moving files and, sharing information, which may not necessarily be, a scanned image of a slide. So I guess there's a lot of different aspects to it. But yeah, I guess, so where did you start? And it sounds like that was a workflow kind of behind the scenes. So what was the business case for that? And then at some point you got to the point of digitizing the images, and what was the business case for that?
Well, number one, we wanted to stop cutting down trees. When I remember when we first started in this business, we made tons of copies, right? Copies for the lab, copies for this person, copies for billing, copies for that. So we really wanted to eliminate that, and with the development of the cloud and being able to then have distributed access to information, we wanted to then create the processes that would be very easily adapted to our business and having instant access to information. So one of the first things we did, we created a process what we used to call first pass, second pass, and it was, we first wanted to get that case accession, get the minimum amount of information necessary to push that tissue or that specimen through the process. But then, since we were already scanning all the information, we used to call it second pass, where we had then a group of people doing all of the rest of the data entry and insurance verification and everything. And the idea was, if you think about it, we had a process where we had that initial accession, and then we had kind of two branches, one which became the clinical branch, which went into the lab and so on. And then we had kind of the finance and insurance side. And hopefully at the end, they would meet together when the pathologist closed the case, and we could then immediately bill and send the reports and do our QC and all of that, so that pathologists closed the case and everything was done and would cascade one after the other. So that was really our initial area of looking at digitizing our process. And then back in the days of where we met with bioimaging, when I first saw their scanner, met Mohan, a dear friend, to me it was like, again, it was my radiology days, my imaging days. This is like a no-brainer. We got to do this. Obviously, there was a lot more constraints and technology issues then than they are today. And we started initially with doing the HER2 and ER/PR as the first area that we started to digitize images was in breast. And that was maybe about 7-8 years ago? Joe, you got to help me with time. I lose sight of time, and with COVID, I don't even know what year we're in.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I think in your case, it was right around 2012, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So then talking about the journey, my medical director, Dr. Juan Carlos Santa, and I decided that we wanted to go and become a digital pathology practice, and we decided that in 2019 to make that our year goal. So Dr. Santa and I packed our bags and started to go around the country and going to different conferences and visiting different sites. And it really gave us a real understanding of the challenge ahead of putting together the whole ecosystem, because sometimes you think of digital pathology as, I got to buy a scanner, right? Maybe that's really the last thing you got to consider. But the first thing you got to consider is everything else. The scanner's kind of an end piece to it.
I see. Yeah, that's a good point about the saving trees. I think what starts off as a tissue sample from a human being and a single slip of paper requisition very quickly multiplies, because as you highlighted, there's multiple different workflows. So once it comes to the window, so to speak, where it's accessioned, you create a benefits investigation or a reimbursement workflow. Then it is the tissue handling and tissue processing workflow. And then once that happens, pathologists are consulting with one another. You're doing ancillary tests, then you're generating a report. So there, and then maybe you're archiving it, you're presenting to tumor board. There's many, 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 many different workflows, all of which used to be associated with paper and cutting down trees. So it quickly multiplies almost exponentially. So I think that's a very interesting point, is that maybe one of the last things you even want to consider is the scanner.
Correct. One of the things, I want to make an analogy for you to think about, because I was involved here with different people looking at going to an electronic medical record. And it was very fascinating to me to watch how people were looking at this, and they were going like, well, here's my process that I'm doing today, and I want to do that same process in my electronic medical record. And to me, it's the current process, that in this analogy is you have a medical office, and they're really in an analog world, and so they want to take that analog process and dump it into a digital world instead of really looking at your whole workflow first, and so that you can optimize the digital world, right? So it was funny because I need this form and this form and this form, but when you look at the forms, most of them had the same information. It's just that when you're in the analog world, you need those, but not in the digital world. And so it's really, thinking about how you transform yourself from analog to digital, and it's a transformation. So when a physician is changing, a primary care physician or whoever, changing their practice and really trying to optimize electronic medical records, you really have to think about your whole practice workflow. And that's how you're going to optimize it. If not, you end up, with really, you don't end up with the benefits that you would gain with the whole process of going into a electronic or digital realm from an analog world.
I see. So the phrase digital transformation really is what we're after, and what we're going for is optimizing things. So what does that last piece look like? The actual scanning of slides and going from the light microscope to the computer monitor.
Well, so just to give you a little quick update of the journey. So we took that year, we went around, we looked at everybody, and the things that we know we wanted to do was we felt that we were, obviously we're trailblazing. We're in a very early stage development of this industry. We really didn't want to lock ourselves into anybody's ecosystem, if you want to call it that. And so we decided that we wanted to create our own ecosystem. So we went out. Fortunately, we have a very sharp IT team, and so we were able then to put together our whole IT infrastructure, so that we could do all of our file management and all of those things using our existing pathology workflow platform, and then we were able to integrate the scanners. So that process, and then by going around and looking at how people were doing their workflows, it really helped us to understand that. You hear so many people still having problems of having, issues of interfacing with their existing, want to call it limb systems or pathology systems and scanning and barcoding and all of that. Fortunately, we didn't have any of those issues. So for us, that was not a problem. So it was, ours was more, how do we create the infrastructure? How do we validate the process? Because I think that's the other very critical aspect. And we obviously used the CAP guidelines, and we did everything under the CAP structure, and that was important. So that's how we ended up putting the whole package together. And the way I see it is, we created the racetrack. Now we're ready. We're ready really to go to the next level, which we'll talk about, which is AI. So, but we first have to lay down the racetrack, and that's really the important part. And how our vision is we feel we want to be an open system. We feel there's going to be a lot of development in this arena. There's going to be a lot of ideas. There's a tremendous amount of opportunities, incredible scientists out there, and people doing wonderful things. And we want to be able to not limit ourselves, and so we want to be able to work with as many people as we can, and have that ability of sharing knowledge and gaining from other people's experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Sharing knowledge and gaining from other people's experience, I think, is a key. And I think a lot of groups are going to be looking to you and learn from what you've done. So let me follow up there. You mentioned the V word, validation, as kind of a key component to the system. So, for people on the fence or people who are just sticking their toes in the water, what does that process look like? Is that a formidable thing? The goal presumably is to show that you can get comparable results using scan slides and a monitor as you would get looking at an H&E slide, a glass slide, and a microscope. So how formidable a task is the validation?
Well, I think it's pretty well laid out in the CAP documentation. I mean, we took that as our starting point, and then we looked at all of the different tissue types that we had. We looked at all of our different stains and immunos and so on, and we set out to validate each one of those each one of those distinct tissues and stains, comparing that. And we did that with a 2-week washout period. So all of our pathologists had a 2-week washout period, and so we did both, and that's how we structured everything, and then had the opportunity to, since we had multiple pathologists, then we could really look and see, is there a real difference between one group and another group, or one pathologist and another pathologist, between the different modalities, be it microscope or the monitor. The other interesting point is that because when we did this, we weren't encumbered by any restrictions in what technology and monitors to use. Currently we're using a 49-inch curved monitor, and when you look at Joe, when you look at a nice core, and you can see that core biopsy of the prostate spread across that monitor, it's kind of a no-brainer. It's sitting there. Everything's there for you, and that just that process alone is makes it so much better for you from a diagnostic perspective and workflow perspective.
This episode of Digital Pathology Today has been brought to you in part by DJT Solutions, your single source for all your digital pathology requirements, from consultation services to system requirements, including installation, training, and life cycle support. Since 1995, DJT Solutions, we are your best choice for your best results.
I think that's an interesting point, is that there's the possibility for things to be even better than they were before, right? It's not a compromise, and it's not cutting corners and squeezing efficiencies. We can actually enhance the experience, which I think might be surprising to some people.
Right. I think that humans, we hate change. And I always tell people, when you come to CorePlus, the C in Core is about change. If we're not having change in our organization, we're bored, and everybody, that doesn't like it. So we're all about change. But it's an incredible change, and you have to try it. You have to try it. It definitely, our group, just simple ergonometrics. The way you sit, just your whole body posture is different. You're not, your neck and your back, and so it's from your human comfort level. That's we could probably write papers on that just by itself, giving you that ability. Then you have tools at hand. So how it is to measure under a microscope versus here you can measure pretty easily. You can capture those measurements. There's just some very basic things that you forget about, that you do on a daily basis, that becomes so much easier. And you're like, wow, I didn't have this before. But you got to go through that aha moment to really understand the power of this. There's a group out of Spain, that Ratamero, who's written papers on his efficiency gains, and he talks about a 20% efficiency gain just by going digital. And we've met with him, and we've chatted now, and great guys. And he's shown 20% increment. And imagine, now with COVID, you don't have to travel. You can work from wherever. You can work from home. And so now, you get that efficiency. So there's a lot of benefits that we can look at, that comes, if you really think about it, it's quality of life. And what's the price for quality of life? I don't think that we can. We can quantify it. Everything's quantifiable, but just think about that. So.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Just as you were saying that, I think you have that aha moment. And I was just reflecting there for a second. The ridiculous things that we used to do, or probably still do, under the microscope, right? Like holding that green magic marker and drawing lines and dots, right? Here's where the tumor starts, here's where it stops, then pulling it out, then getting a ruler out of your desk drawer and trying to measure it. All the while it's very time consuming, and it's probably completely or relatively inaccurate compared to just a few clicks of the mouse, on your monitor, where you're probably able to generate a measurement that's clearly superior and much, much quicker. So let's talk about efficiencies. So I think there was, probably earlier in your career, around the year 2000, I think there was a major consolidation, in the way we practice pathology, consolidating histology labs, utilizing couriers and FedEx. So I think we were able to squeeze out a lot of efficiencies there in that time period, where in a typical city in America, you might have 5 or 6 hospitals, each with a full staff of pathologists, and there was a lot of consolidation there and movement towards a centralized histology lab. And I think a lot was squeezed out there. So do you think there's still a lot of room for efficiencies with the digital workflow, and maybe even areas that we were unexpected or unintended where we're able to see even more efficiencies?
Well, I think that what does digital pathology give you? It's and I called it you decouple the pathologist from the glass. So you're no longer a slave to the glass. So now we can think about distributed pathology. We can think about centralized processing, but distributed reading. And that distribution can be really anywhere in the world. So if you're a practice and you have pathologists scattered around, there's very efficient ways where you can this is not even AI, with just some basic algorithms, I can say, oh, these cases go to Joe, these cases go to Mary, these cases go to, I could do load balancing, I can do it by specialty, I can, you can just, consult each other immediately. So it just opens up a whole new world that you're not accustomed to. So I see it, what I call decoupling the pathologist from the glass, and then I see distributed pathology, and hopefully now with the freedom that COVID gave us from CLIA and that whole area where we have to get the regulatory environment caught up with the digital world, this presents a tremendous opportunity.
Right, absolutely. I think that's interesting. Is that the desire to gain efficiencies and the desire to decouple has always been with us. And now we have, these technologies which are helping to accelerate it even more. So let me ask you, before we jump into AI, any lessons learned, so far on this journey? Anything that surprised you, anything you wish you would have known, anything you would have done differently before embarking on the process?
One of the things that I think we have to think about too is that we have to find resources outside of pathology. And what I say by that is that, we were fortunate in our visit to Memorial Sloan Kettering that as we were walking through that their department, which have as you well know, a very robust digital pathology department, and they're doing a lot of great stuff there. We were able to talk with Jennifer. Jennifer was at that time running the department. I think she now subsequently is with Philips. And one of the things that caught my attention in talking to her was that they used to have a lot of medical photographers, and kind of medical photography was becoming obsolete with all of the new advances in digital, and so she recast these individuals into the digital world to run the digital the scanners, and it made a lot of sense to me. I think a lot of us think about, we'll take our histotech and he can run or she can run our scanner, but they don't have the skill sets, because this is all about colors and about photography. About totally a different skill set than what a histotechnologist has. It's not the person doesn't need to know about pathology, but really needs to know about gamma, needs to know about all the other things that we don't know about yet. So in that conversation, for Dr. Santa and myself, really created, we said, wow, that was one of those moments that you go, got it. That was an aha moment. It says, no, we're not going to get somebody that is histotech, and we're going to move them over to do scanners. No. And we were fortunate to bring on a young lady who's embraced this. She comes from more from a world of photography, and Photoshop and all of and in that area. And it has been really a blessing for us. And it was totally somebody that didn't know anything about pathology. So that was really for us, a graphic artist person, was the answer, and it proved right for us.
Okay, yeah, I like that. Sometimes kind of looking outside of our discipline or looking outside the confines of what we're used to can really open up new worlds and new possibilities. Now, speaking of which, so I think you have some exciting news. You've implemented an AI-based solution, which is one of the first in the Americas and even in the world. So, and if I kind of understand the spirit of what you're going for, your philosophy, I suspect, so let's talk about what it is, but I suspect that the workflows and the triage is going to be a key component of such a system.
Yeah, Joe, we were back in as part of this journey, and since we we're leaders in uropathology here in Puerto Rico, we've always are focused on new modalities and new tests to support our practice. I had read an article that was a press release put out by UPenn and talked about a company called Ibex in Israel, and obviously immediately I sent an email, and this was back in August of 2018, and started to converse with their CEO Joseph, and we struck up a conversation, and in that time, obviously, when we talked, for me it was like prostate, AI, we got to do this, but obviously we had to, like I said, we had to lay down the racetrack, and so we started our conversations, and to make a long story short, Joseph, the CEO, came to Puerto Rico, and we talked, and subsequently we went to Israel, and we started our collaboration. In June of this year, we officially operationalized AI, and 100% of our cases have, if you want to think about it, a digital second read. And when we look at the data, it is really phenomenal. It is, right now we're 99.7% sensitivity. There's really very difficult that anything could slip by. So every prostate case gets a second read. Now we're moving into the first read scenario next year. We're preparing our systems for that. And then we're starting now with breast AI.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So the main function, it sounds now, is, did you say quality assurance?
Yeah, it's quality assurance, but I think it's also comfort with the technology, right? We've now done over 1,500 cases. I mean, it's we use it on a daily basis. Our reports go out with heat maps. I have a T-shirt now that says "I love heat maps." We'll have to send you one. But you see, to me, that all this did was validate us that this works, right? But what does this really mean? What does this really mean? This is a transformational moment for pathology. I mean, we've talked about precision medicine before. I mean, we're really now finally seeing the efforts of precision medicine for pathologists. I believe, and our team embraces that the skill sets of the pathologists of the future will be, a little bit different. It'll be, you need to have knowledge on machine learning, and you need to have knowledge of algorithms. You need to have, a new skill set is going to develop for the pathologist. I don't think that this is a competition between how good is the AI and how good is the pathologist. It's not about that. I think if we stay there, I think we're really at a low level. We need to really think beyond that. And as we embrace this is going to change the way we practice pathology. I don't see my pathologist reading every single case in the future.
Oh my, that is a change. But I think, as you said, it's not about, is the AI going to replace the pathologist? I completely agree. I think it's more about how can we elevate the profession, make ourselves more valuable, provide better service, and then provide even more offerings that are ultimately going to help doctors and patients. So, but practically speaking, what does it look like, implementing an AI solution, from a validation and regulatory scenario? On the one hand, I think this might set off a lot of alarm bells and get people's concern and attention, focused on that it's an AI system and may be perceived as black box, so to speak. But then on the other hand, if it's just kind of running in the background and helping what you do, it shouldn't be that big of a deal.
Well, look, at the end of the day, there's a signature there by a pathologist who's responsible for what's happened. So it's not we're handing this off and there's no pathologist involvement, right? And obviously, what we're doing and what we've done, first of all, you go through, first of all, is a calibration process, right? Of the algorithm with your own data set, so that you're comfortable with what's there. After we do the calibration, then we do a validation. We did 100 cases over 1,200 slides. And then number 3 is, and this is the most important part when we put this into an operational perspective, that you're seeing the results in front of you. So the way we do it right now is, the pathologist reads the case, we upload it to the cloud, and then if there's there's a reconciliation, right? And if there's a difference, we get alerts. And what happens with that is that we have developed the comfort level, and we have developed the knowledge base that says, this is just as good or better than what I'm doing. I mean, look, it's picked up small foci that were missed. I mean, look, in the best of hands, you're talking about a 3% false positive rate. And maybe with people that maybe don't have the expertise in prostate, it could go higher. But again, it's not about comparing here. It's about building the trust, and then moving this into a first read, and then moving this into an auto sign out, where you then are monitoring the algorithm, you're doing QC on it. Look, it's the same thing we do. Think about what we're doing with cytology, right? We have cytotechs that read cases, and we do a 10% negative review.
Right.
I mean, right? And we trust that, correct?
We trust those human beings.
That's right. We trust those human beings. So why can't we trust an algorithm if we do those kinds of same quality control measures on that? And I think it's the same. Look, change. It's about change. It's our resistance to change. Go back to, and maybe I wasn't there because I didn't run a clinical lab back maybe many years ago, when things were done manually, and all of a sudden machines started to take over. And I'm sure that there were people questioning, machines can't be better than the med tech. And it's always the transformation, it's always the change that impedes us to look at the opportunity. Because this is really what people need to look at, is really look at it as, what is the opportunity? It's not about the change, is about the opportunity. So the pathologist of the future is not going to read every single case, because there's no need to. If we look at our practice right now, 40%, 43% of our cases are positive. Let's say 40%. So 60% are negative. So I'm using up if you think about your mental capacity for your day, right? We all look at it as a gas tank, right? We start the morning with a full tank, hopefully, unless we had a rough night. We start out with a full tank. And so I'm taking, of that full tank, I'm taking energy to read 60% of negative cases, thinking that there could be a cancer in that case. If we use these technologies, what this technology is going to tell me is, look, here's the 60% you don't even have to worry about. Focus on this 40%, and I'm going to help you. As a matter of fact, and I'm going to help you. So now you have space in your mind, in your high level thinking, to do other high level functions.
Right, absolutely. I think this really highlights, that humans and machine learning algorithms are differently suited to things, and that humans are, very, very good at looking at slides under the microscope and making the diagnosis very accurately, as your data shows, but then, it's not all glamour and making hard decisions in the day-to-day workflow. It's oftentimes looking for the needle in the haystack. And I think we could really all benefit from assistance from various sources, AI systems in this case. So now, thank you so much for being with us, Mariano. So before we wrap up here, what's next? What excites you over the next 10 years? Where do you see things going?
Well, I think that, the exciting part now to be in this business today is we're going to see a transformational pathology. You talk to a lot of pathologists, we've been doing this for 100 years the same way. Well, you know what? That's great, but the next 100 years are going to be incredible. The other aspect of it is, now that we have turned that last slide, that analog information, into digital, into pixels, there's so much information in that file now, that we're going to see so many exciting things coming about. Prognostic markers right from the tissue, right there. It's in front of us. We just can't see it. This is going to help all of that. We're going to be able to mine all of that data, and hopefully we'll have the time to do that. It's going to free up the pathologist to do those high level functions. And so that's what's exciting about this. It's also going to create a closer community. We're going to be able to reach out across the desk, across the street, or across the world for support, information, education. So many new things are going to open up for all of us. So it's really an exciting time to be in this field, because change is wonderful. Change is opportunity. And I think change needs to be embraced.
Yeah, change is opportunity indeed. Well, our guest has been Mariano de Socarraz from CorePlus Diagnostics. We'll see you next time on Digital Pathology Today.
This has been Digital Pathology Today. Please be sure to subscribe. Thanks for listening.